I guess the Dell Latitude 5285 would be Dell's answer to the Surface 4 Pro. Of course, focused towards the business market, but along with updated specs and ports, it actually has some legit advantages over that one. How big those are and what it actually even means, especially for the business user, that is something we are going to find out today. And I would say let's just start off with the design and build quality. Here we can already see the nice fabric material of the type cover, but what I want to point to is the first and foremost obvious thing, the weight, because the tablet on its own already weighs 926 grams, and along with the type cover we are already at 1.265 kilograms, which definitely makes it heavier than the competition, and that is something that you will have to get used to. Same as unfortunately also for the flickering here on the screen, because whatever I tried to get rid of that on the camera I just couldn't, so I'm sorry for that. But otherwise we can already see it's quite thin, and the materials that they use definitely feel premium. It doesn't really bend, so it feels definitely quite sturdy. Maybe not the biggest fan I am of this stand, because that one is a little bit flimsy, so it has a little bit of wiggle room, but that's not a problem. But what I would have liked to have seen is some kind of polish or some kind of protection here on the bottom, because the sound on the desk is something that I have a hard time getting used to. Because this just doesn't sound right, because I've told them this already when I had this on a launch event, but that's pretty much the only complaint. What it can do though is put it all the way back if you want to use it with the stylus, and that is absolutely fine. It's very, and it feels very sturdy after all. One thing also a little bit of a smaller gripe is that you could actually lose this flap because it's not kind of sticking to anything. So here you would have the SD card and SIM card tray, so maybe a little bit of a better solution would be welcome, but if you just are a little bit cautious, you should be fine. You can already see here the speakers that go towards the side and the back, of course stereo, so this solution works quite nice. In terms of the top, we can see the power button with a status LED, also some nice ventilation holes and so on, along with two microphones. On the left side we have the headphone jack, the volume rocker, another microphone, USB 3.0, two USB Type-C. Unfortunately, none of them is Thunderbolt, and only the lower one is for charging, but both are for DisplayPort if you want to. On the bottom, you can also see the ports for the type cover, and of course, here we have a kind of lock, but it's not Kensington. And here we have an SD card tray with the Windows button, the one that I didn't use ever at all. On the back, you can also see the fingerprint reader, the camera with a microphone, and this would be, I think, NFC. There is a kind of innovative feature because you can see those two bumps, and if you would actually press those, it makes the stand flip up. So if you just put it on the table, as you can here maybe see, it opens and you could put it down. Actually quite a nice solution. Maybe not something super extreme that you need, but it's fine. I talked already about the bezels, I think, and of course you have the camera, and that's why I would already like to go to the type cover, because I'm not a bigger fan of it as I'm usually of Latitude keyboards, but it is still absolutely good, actually very good, because we have two levels of backlight and we have still, for a type cover, a nice amount of travel. It's maybe not the best one overall because the tactile feedback doesn't feel as good as, for example, something on like a Lenovo Mix or something, but you can type on it really nice. We have all the important shortcuts with everything else, so it works definitely very good without any problems. But I've seen already better ones, especially if you are used to Latitude keyboards, proper ones. The fingerprint reader, I have to say, is very annoying because it's definitely not the most reliable one. It worked out quite good now, but usually I had quite a hard time. You have to really push it properly and hold it for longer, so phones are making a way better job here. The trackpad on its own is definitely big enough, so no complaints here at all. And it works out quite okay. The only thing that I don't like so much is something that you will maybe see here is the scrolling, because that just didn't feel right to me. So a precision trackpad makes a better job. It works smooth, absolutely no problem, and it works quite precise. But this is the only thing that I didn't like so much, because otherwise the precision is nice, the texture is nice, and all the gestures get accepted. Absolutely top. So no complaints here. I'm just not the biggest fan of scrolling in Chrome, but that is something that is quite a common thing. Let me lower the brightness a little bit so you can actually see the display. And I would actually already like to go to the pen now, because we don't need the type cover anymore. And I would also say, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see things a little bit better. And like I said, I'm really unfortunate for the flickering, but I just couldn't get rid of that. If we use the pen, all I can tell you is that we should take away my scribbling. It works out really nice because this is an active pen, and what I'm every time surprised by is how good it actually works for text recognition, because this was surprisingly well done, because I could write all the things and they got accepted very well. It is very precise towards the sides and everywhere else. You have, of course, two buttons. One is for kind of selecting things and one is for erasing, as you can see here. Of course, you also have a nice body to it because it feels actually quite natural. It is quite soft, I have to actually say, and it reacts very well. It is not maybe quite on a Surface 4 Pro level or maybe even on an S Pen level from a Tab S3, but it feels actually quite nice because it doesn't feel like you would write on glass. Feels quite soft and nice. So this is definitely a very good stylus for sure. But now I would actually like to already go to the display. The maximum or especially lowest brightness is 20 lux. The maximum is 565, which is very bright. So kudos to that. The white point out of the box was a little bit on the cooler side, but nothing to complain here about. The black's quite deep, pretty much completely what do I mean? Free of any sorts of light bleed or something like that. That is what I meant, sorry. And the colors, I have to say, are actually really nice because it is of course a glossy display, so it will reflect a lot, but the colors are absolutely nice. And I don't want to disturb you here too much with the screen, so let's just switch to the sound already. But the display, definitely very good. It's maybe not the highest res screen, but especially for business users who often use legacy apps, this will be an advantage because you don't have any scaling issues or anything else. So let's get to the speakers. I actually should have maybe lowered the volume right up front because I have to say this is a really good speaker. Actually, maybe I should even call it a very good speaker because as you have heard, it is very loud and it actually doesn't even sound all that bad because it sounds quite full and rich for, of course, a tablet speaker, but I was surprised how loud it is, how good the actual quality is. But even though I have to still say that the Dell speakers tend, especially if you use the Dell Max audio software, to distort a little bit on the higher end of the volume spectrum. So that is something to keep in mind. But also really good is the headphone jack because good quality, good amount of volume, so also really nice here. When it comes to the performance, the first thing that I want to show is the SSD speeds. As always, quite normal for a business device, absolutely fine speeds, no problems here at all. But one thing that I have to point out being not that great is the cold boot times, because those were at about, and this is not all that great, 20 to 25 seconds. So it was a little bit between that. So this is not all that great. But otherwise the performance here, especially in Chrome, if you just want to browse, are actually even better than on a Surface 4 Pro because you have a lower resolution to push and there Chrome has just an easier job done. But I have a hard time looking at the flicker. Let me quickly tell you the same thing as I did on all other pretty much U-series laptops. You can do pretty much everything you want, especially all business tasks should be no problem at all. The Kaby Lake i5 gets the job done just easily, and with 8 GB of RAM, you can load even heavier images with a lot of background tasks, so no problems here at all. Of course, you could do some light photo and video editing, but I don't think the business user will do that, and everything else he has to do here works absolutely fine. And due to the actually, like I said, lower resolution, you can get an even better experience than on some other ones. But I've covered that, so let's get into heat and noise and start off as always with the noise demo. Okay, so now that you've heard the fan, what do I have to point out? First of all, the great thing is no call button, not that I could hear of, so the device pretty much in normal use is absolutely silent and it never made any sounds. I never heard the fans kick in. What I did though is yesterday when I made my heat test and went up here where the temperature is like 5 degrees higher, then I heard level 1. But level 1 is pretty much inaudible in normal use in a normal environment. Maybe 2 is something that you can hear, but even level 2 is very subtle. And even level 3, which is the maximum noise level that you will hear, it is still very subtle because it's not a whiny noise. It's a very even sound, not all that loud. So even at absolute full maximum load, this is an absolute acceptable device when it comes to the noise levels. When it comes to the heat levels, here is what I have to point out. I had an ambient temperature of 26 degrees and on idle I was, and that is something that I have to point out, at about 80 degrees max for CPU, but usually averaging at 68. But the device on the right side, where I especially hold it, is actually very cool all the time. So it only gets a little bit warmer on the left side, where we had it about 31 degrees and about maybe 36 degrees to 39 degrees on the bottom here, where the CPU is. This side also stays cold because this is not attached to anything directly and you won't notice that. On the top though, you will get, like for example, maybe 31 to 36 in the middle here again, colder on the right side. Under load things changed though, because there I even reached CPU temperatures maybe to 86, sometimes even 90 degrees, and I'm sorry the screen is a little bit too bright because it is a very bright display, as I said. And there we get temperatures on the back here are about 43 and 47 in the middle. On the front we were here at around 30 and 43 in the middle once again. So temperatures are a little bit higher, nothing to really concern about, because in normal use I didn't notice it. And if you are just in normal tasks, not doing anything like full load and so on, I didn't really bother, because the good thing is the device never felt really warm, especially where you hold it. It's only in the middle where you don't really have access to with your hands. So no complaints here from that side. So noise and heat also very good. Now about the battery, a charge time is at around 2 hours and 30, but once again this is with the adaptive or the normal default charging pattern, because if you go into the BIOS you can still change that. Latitude's devices allow this to change or to choose between 4 different presets. There is an express one that should charge well below 2 hours, but also one that is a little bit better on the battery, a little bit less stressful, and you will therefore have to charge a little bit longer. But the battery life, I have to say, was noticeably better than on the Surface 4 Pro, because what I got here was values from around 4.5, but even up to 7 hours. I would say I averaged at around 6, maybe 6.5 hours with a brightness of 30-40% usually. But I also have to mention, that's one thing that I always do but never actually said before, I turn off all the battery saving mechanisms of the display. So this is kind of to find out the worst case scenario and just to get the best experience, because I don't really like those power saving technologies. But I would say 6 hours, this is like at least 1, if not 1.5 hours better than the Surface 4 Pro that I had with the i5. But of course, with your use, you should get, I think, closer to maybe even 7 hours, because I kind of push my device a little bit harder. In terms of software, what do I have to point out here? Not all that much, but one thing that I wanted to get into is the Waves Max Audio Pro software for the sound. You can enable that, and you should enable that. And then you have some options like, for example, max bass details and so on. And it makes a difference. You have, of course, some more options. This is nice. Otherwise, it's pretty much the usual Dell software. One thing that I had to point in terms of bugs though, when I used the Groove Player or the photos and videos, what happened a lot of times when I watched a video, it played for maybe 1 or 2 minutes and then it kind of just started once again. Or sometimes there were some odd issues, even in YouTube, where the screen just stopped responding. It was kind of black for a second and it refreshed and it was fine again. So there are some minor software bugs I guess they should still fix. But otherwise, I would say let's get into the pros and cons. What I want to point out here is the good port selection, because after all, we still have a Type A port and the USB-C Type-C ports, even though we don't have Thunderbolt. We have very good build quality with a good design, but a little bit on the heavier side. A very good type cover and still a good trackpad. I only did like the scrolling so much. The active pen is very good as well, same goes for the display. A really good speaker and headphone jack, a very good daily use performance, actually maybe even a little bit better than that. Really good battery life as well, silent in normal use. The fan noise is very subtle under load and no audible coil whine, and it doesn't feel warm at all, even though the temperatures actually are a little bit on the higher side. But on the negative parts, we have no Thunderbolt 3. The fingerprint reader was a little bit annoying and unreliable. Like I said, the stand-on desk sound that I didn't like so much. It is also heavier than the competition. The resolution is lower than similar devices, but that's in brackets because for a business user especially, this won't make an impact at all. Actually will be an advantage. Also quite long cold boot with about 20 to 25 seconds. High temperatures in general, and it is expensive. But the reason why it's a little bit more expensive than the mainstream device is just because it's a business device, and along with that you get some business support. So you get it replaced or repaired on the same day, which just costs more. You have to just sacrifice that. But otherwise, what are the main advantages over, for example, like a Surface 4 Pro? I would say, first of all, you have just the newer ports. You have the newer processor, because you have the Kaby Lake, which is more efficient, so you get better battery life. You also already have USB Type-C in case you need that, which I don't think is all that important yet for business users, but I guess the transition phase should come up soon. And otherwise, it is quite high build quality. You get better support. The sound is very good, almost, I would say, on a Surface Pro level. The display could actually be an advantage due to the lower resolution. You will have an easier time using it with the touch and with the stylus and things like, for example, legacy software where it has to scale. So that could be an actual advantage. The performance was also a little bit better, especially if you use touch a lot, because it just has to push the lower resolution a little bit easier, and that's nice. Heat, though, is where it is a little bit behind the Surface Pro because it gets noticeably warmer, not really louder, even though I have to say The Surface Pro managed to stay pretty much silent all the time. This one just subtle, but still very good. So overall, it is a very good tablet. A little bit more on the expensive side, and it has some minor downsides, maybe not all that much, but especially for what it is, a business Surface 4 Pro kind of device, this makes a really good job, and I can easily recommend it. Of course, the higher price is something that a business user has to decide if it's worth it. Personally though, I would say that I would still stick as a business person with something like maybe a lightweight laptop, because I'm still not the biggest fan of this being, because it is very portable, but is it all that usable in mobile use? Because after all, you have no proper attachment to it if you want to hold it maybe on the side. So it's very easy to transport, but lab use and so on is not all that easy. So that's something you should consider. But otherwise, if you have any further questions left, just leave them down below. If you liked the video, maybe thumbs up and subscription. Otherwise, have a nice day. Bye.